I stood in front of the small bronze mirror in my bedroom, holding up 3 shirts one after another. The lamplight flickered across the fabric, casting soft shadows on the wooden walls of my modest house. Outside, the evening air was cool and carried the faint scent of pine from the forest edge of Harrowmere. I had a date tonight, the first one in months, and for some reason, nothing I owned felt right. My life had always been simple. I lived in a small wooden house at the very edge of town where the neat streets gave way to wilder land. During the day, I worked as a fixer of small things. Oil lamps that refused to stay lit, stubborn locks, creaky pulleys, and the occasional broken mill wheel. People brought their broken objects to me, and I made them useful again. It was quiet work. Honest work. I liked it that way. Mornings were for labor, afternoons for finishing jobs, and evenings for simple meals cooked over my small hearth. Sometimes I would walk to the local tavern for a mug of weak ale and a bit of conversation with the other townsfolk. Nothing complicated. No drama, no entanglements that could turn a man's heart upside down. That's how I preferred it, or at least that's what I told myself. The house right next door belonged to my orc neighbor. She had been living there for nearly 2 years now, the same amount of time I had known her. At first, it was nothing more than polite nods when we met at the well or passed each other on the path, but over time, small things built up between us. We shared firewood during the harsh winters. She would leave bundles of fresh herbs at my door when I was sick with a cough. I would help her repair her roof after storms. On particularly tiring days, we sometimes shared supper, my simple stew for her bread or her strong herbal tea for my roasted vegetables. We never planned these moments. They just happened, easy and natural, the way good neighbors take care of one another. She was strong in a way that showed in her broad shoulders and steady hands, yet there was a gentleness to her that always surprised me. She scolded me when I forgot to eat properly. She laughed quietly at my clumsy jokes. Some nights we would sit together on the shared porch between our houses saying very little, just listening to the rain or the crickets. I called it friendship. I never allowed myself to think it could be more. Or maybe I was simply too dense to see what had been growing right in front of me all along. Tonight was different. Tonight I had a date with Elena, the baker's daughter. She was kind, with a pretty smile and easy conversation. It felt like a good step, something normal, something expected for a man my age. I wanted to look presentable. That's why I was standing here with 3 shirts in my hands, a plain white one, a deep green one, and a brown one I had recently patched. None of them felt quite right. I thought of my neighbor. She had a good eye for these things. Better than mine, at least. Without thinking too much about it, I gathered the shirts and stepped out into the cooling evening air. The short walk to her door felt ordinary, the same path I had taken hundreds of times. I knocked. A moment later, the door opened. She stood there in a loose robe, her dark hair tied back hastily, a steaming cup of herbal tea in one large green hand. She looked tired from a long day of learning and gathering plants, but there was something warm and real about the way she looked at me, beautiful in a way that didn't need to try. I held up the 3 shirts with a sheepish grin. "Be honest," I said. "Do I look okay? I have a date tonight." For the briefest moment, her expression froze. It was just a flicker, barely noticeable if I hadn't been looking right at her. But I saw it. Something shifted behind her golden eyes. She stepped aside without a word and gestured for me to come in. I followed her into the familiar warmth of her home. The scent of dried herbs and beeswax candles filled the air. Books on medicine lay open on her table, and a small fire crackled in the hearth. I laid the shirts out on the wooden table. She moved closer, studying them carefully. Her fingers, strong, calloused from work but surprisingly gentle, brushed over the white shirt. "This one," she said quietly. "Why?" I asked, curious. "Because it makes you look honest." I laughed lightly. Honest is good, right? She didn't smile. She kept her eyes on the shirt for a long moment before speaking again. "It depends on who you want to see that honesty." The air between us suddenly felt heavier. I tried to keep things light. "Elena will probably like it." Silence stretched out. She didn't respond right away. She stared at the shirt, her jaw tight. Then she lifted her gaze to meet mine directly. Her eyes were bright, almost shining with emotion I couldn't quite read. "Elias," she said, her voice cracking just slightly, "why haven't you realized that I love you?" The words hit me like a physical blow. The white shirt slipped from my fingers and fell onto the table. My mind went completely blank. All the shared meals, the quiet evenings on the porch, the herbs left at my door when I was ill, the way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention, everything rushed in at once. I stood there, stunned, unable to form a single word. She turned away abruptly. She walked to the door and opened it, her back to me. "Forget I said that," she said, her voice strained. "Just go. You have your date." I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat felt tight, as if the words were stuck somewhere deep inside. My feet moved on their own as I stepped past her into the cool night air. Behind me, the door closed with a soft, final click. For the first time in nearly 2 years, the house right next to mine suddenly felt impossibly far away, like it belonged to an entirely different world. I walked back to my own door, the white shirt still clutched in my hand, my heart beating strangely in my chest. I walked back to my house in a daze, the white shirt still clutched tightly in my fist. The fabric felt heavier now, as if Mara's words had soaked into every thread. "Why haven't you realized that I love you?" The sentence kept echoing in my head, louder than the crunch of gravel under my boots. I stepped inside, closed the door, and stood there for a long moment, staring at nothing. Eventually I changed into the white shirt. It fit the same as it always had, yet it felt different. Marked somehow, like she had left a piece of herself on me. I looked in the bronze mirror again. The man staring back looked lost. I told myself I was still going on the date. Elena was waiting. It would be rude to cancel now. Besides, maybe a night out with a kind, normal girl would clear my head. The walk to the Golden Lantern Tavern felt longer than usual. The streets of Harrowmere were quiet under the lantern light, the air carrying the smell of wood smoke and fresh bread from the baker's shop. Elena was already there when I arrived. She wore a simple green dress that matched her eyes, and she smiled when she saw me. "You look nice," she said warmly. "The white shirt suits you." I forced a smile and thanked her. We sat at a corner table. She ordered stew and fresh bread. I ordered the same without really thinking. She talked about her father's bakery, the difficult customers, her dream of one day opening her own little shop with a bright sign and flower boxes in the windows. I nodded at the right moments. I laughed when she laughed. I asked questions that sounded interested. But my mind was not in that tavern. It was next door, in Mara's house, replaying the way her voice had cracked when she spoke those words. Every time Elena smiled at me, I saw Mara's face instead, the way her golden eyes had looked at me right before she turned away. Every time Elena's hand brushed mine across the table, I remembered Mara's fingers touching the white shirt on her wooden table. Halfway through the meal, Elena set her spoon down and looked at me directly. "Elias," she said gently, "you have something on your mind tonight, or someone." I opened my mouth to deny it, but the lie wouldn't come. The silence that followed was answer enough. Elena's smile faded, but there was no anger in her eyes, only quiet understanding. "It's all right," she said. "I'm not upset, but whoever she is, you should go talk to her. It's not fair to her, and it's not fair to you sitting here pretending." I felt a wave of shame wash over me. This woman I had barely started to know had seen through me in one evening, something I had failed to see in myself for 2 whole years. I apologized sincerely. Elena accepted it with grace, even wished me luck as I stood to leave. She was kinder than I deserved. The night air was colder now. I walked home slowly, my boots scuffing the dirt path. When I reached the narrow lane between our 2 houses, I stopped in front of Mara's door. The windows were dark, no warm glow of candles, no faint scent of herbal tea drifting out. I raised my hand to knock, then let it fall. What would I even say? I'm sorry I stood there like an idiot. I think I might feel the same. The words felt too clumsy, too late. I turned and went inside my own house instead. The next 3 days were quiet, in the worst possible way. Mara avoided me completely. I didn't see her at the well in the mornings. No bundle of herbs appeared on my doorstep. No soft singing drifted over the shared fence while she hung laundry. The house next to mine felt empty even though I knew she was still there. I realized then how much space she had quietly taken up in my daily life. A morning greeting, a shared meal, the simple comfort of knowing she was just a few steps away. On the fourth day, I couldn't stand it anymore. I baked a small bag of honey cakes, nothing fancy, just something simple, and picked a fresh bundle of the healing herbs she always used. I left them on her doorstep before dawn, with no note, just the offering. When I returned from work that evening, the bag and the herbs were gone. No reply, no message, but the empty spot on her step told me she had taken them. She was still listening, even if she wasn't ready to speak. I stood there for a long time staring at her closed door, the weight in my chest a little lighter than it had been the night before. For the first time since her confession, I allowed myself to wonder what it would feel like if I finally let myself see her the way she had been seeing me all along. By the end of the week, I couldn't stand the silence anymore. The house next door felt like a wound I kept poking, and every quiet evening made it worse. I stood in my small kitchen, boiling water and measuring out the dried apple slices Mara always favored. The sweet tart scent filled the room as I steeped 2 generous cups of tea. My hands shook slightly while I stirred. I had spent 3 days replaying her words, 3 nights staring at the ceiling, and 1 long afternoon leaving honey cakes on her doorstep like a coward. It was time to stop hiding. I carried the 2 steaming cups across the narrow space between our houses. My heart hammered harder than it had when I fixed a jammed mill wheel in the middle of a storm. I knocked. It took a long time for the door to open. When it did, Mara stood there in the same loose robe, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. The shadows under her golden eyes told me she hadn't slept well either. She looked at the 2 cups in my hands, then at my face, and her expression tightened. "What do you want, Elias?" "I don't know how not to come," I said simply. She stared at me for several heartbeats. Then she stepped aside without another word, letting me in. Her home smelled the same: dried herbs, beeswax, and the faint trace of whatever medicine she had been grinding earlier. Books lay open on the table and the fire in the hearth had burned low. I set the cups down carefully. We stood there for a moment, the silence thick between us. "I'm sorry," I started, my voice rough. "I'm sorry I just stood there like an idiot when you said what you said. It wasn't because you were wrong. It was because I was too surprised and too stupid to see what was right in front of me for 2 years. Mara let out a small, tired laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "I shouldn't have said it," she murmured. "I knew you had a date. I knew you were excited. I couldn't hold it in anymore." She walked to the table and sat down heavily. I took the chair across from her. The tea steamed between us, untouched. Mara stared into her cup for a long time before she spoke again. "I've loved you for a while now, Elias. Longer than I want to admit. It started the day you climbed onto my roof in the pouring rain to fix that leak while I was too sick to do it myself. You were soaked through, cursing under your breath, but you stayed until it stopped dripping on my books. Then there was the night I came down with that terrible fever. You sat by my bed until morning, forcing me to drink water and wiping my forehead like it was the most natural thing in the world. And every ordinary supper we shared, those meant more to me than you'll ever know." Her voice grew quieter. "I told myself that just being near you was enough, that watching you smile when you fixed something broken, or hearing you laugh at my terrible jokes was all I needed. But when you stood in my doorway holding those shirts and asked me which one would look best for another woman, something inside me broke. I couldn't pretend anymore." I swallowed hard. The weight of her words settled in my chest, warm and terrifying at the same time. "I never called it love," I admitted, my voice low. "Not out loud. But these last few days without you, everything feels wrong. My house is colder. Dinner tastes like nothing. The walk to the well takes longer because you're not there. I didn't realize how much of my life you had quietly filled until you stopped." Mara looked up. There was hope in her eyes, but also fear. "I don't want you to choose me because you feel guilty. she said. I don't, I answered quickly. I want to choose you because I finally see you, not just as the orc next door who shares firewood and leaves herbs at my door. I want to see you as the woman who has been right here all along. She was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled softly. Finally she nodded, a small, uncertain movement. Then, we go slow, she said. No rushing, no pretending this is easy. We still eat supper together, we still walk to the market, but this time you look at me like a woman, not just a neighbor. And I'll try to believe that you mean it. I felt something loosen in my chest. Slow sounds right. We sat there drinking the tea that had gone lukewarm, the space between us no longer painful, only careful and new. When I finally stood to leave, Mara reached into a small drawer and pulled out a folded scrap of paper. She pressed it into my hand without meeting my eyes. If you ever need to ask about a shirt again, she said softly, wear it for me. I unfolded the note later that night. Her handwriting was neat and steady. Wear the white one. It makes you look like the man I already love. I laughed for the first time in days, quiet, relieved, real. That night I slept deeply, the kind of sleep I hadn't known since her confession. The next morning, I put on the white shirt again. I walked to the well carrying 2 empty buckets, the same path I had taken 1,000 times. Mara was already there, pulling up water. She glanced over when she heard my footsteps. Her gaze landed on the shirt, then flicked away quickly. But I saw the tips of her ears turn a deep, telling green. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. For the first time in 2 years, I looked at the orc woman standing beside me at the well and felt my heart shift into something warmer, clearer, and long overdue. We were beginning again, only this time we both knew exactly what we were starting. We began going slow, just as we had promised. Evenings became quiet rituals of tea on the shared porch, the steam curling between us like a careful secret. Mornings meant walking to the market together, choosing bundles of herbs and fresh vegetables with fingers that sometimes brushed longer than necessary. I helped her mend the sagging fence between our houses, and when the autumn rain came, we shared a simple bowl of soup at my hearth, the sound of rain on the roof filling the spaces where words used to be. Every glance now carried weight. Every accidental touch felt deliberate. We were learning each other again, only this time with eyes wide open. Harrowmere was not a large town. News traveled faster than the river that bordered it. People started noticing. At first it was only curious stares when we walked side by side through the market square. Then the whispers began. Elias has been bewitched by that orc girl. He must have failed with the baker's daughter and settled for the neighbor out of pity. An orc studying medicine? She probably mixes love potions with those herbs of hers. The words stung, but I tried to ignore them. Mara did not. I felt her fingers slip from mine the moment we passed a group of women at the vegetable stall. Her hand retreated to her side as if burned. That night, after the market, I asked her why. We were sitting on her porch again, the lanterns low. She stared into her cup of cool tea. Because they will talk about you, she said quietly. A human man with an orc woman. They will say you were tricked, or desperate, or worse. I can bear their words about me. I've heard them for 2 years, but I don't want them to turn those words against you. I reached for her hand again. This time she let me take it. They've talked about me my whole life, I told her. For fixing broken things instead of becoming a soldier, for living quietly at the edge of town. Their opinions never fed me or kept my roof from leaking. Yours did. She looked at me for a long moment, golden eyes searching. Something in her expression softened, but the worry remained. 2 days later, Elena appeared at my door. I braced myself for anger or awkwardness, but she only smiled gently. I heard the rumors, she said, and I wanted you both to know I didn't start them. In fact, I told a few people the truth. She glanced toward Mara's house. He looked at her even when he was sitting across from me that night. I saw it. Everyone should know it wasn't Mara who came between us. It was the truth that was already there. She even walked over to Mara's door and spoke to her directly, woman to woman. Mara listened in silence, then nodded once, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in days. Elena left us with a small basket of fresh bread and the quiet dignity of someone who refused to let gossip win. The real test came at the apothecary. A child in town, little Tomas, no more than 6, fell dangerously ill with a high fever. The old healer was away visiting another village. Mara was the only one who knew how to prepare the rare root infusion that could break the fever. I stood beside her in the shop while the boy's mother hovered anxiously. The woman hesitated when Mara reached for the herbs. "You're orc," she whispered, as if the word itself explained everything. I stepped forward before Mara could speak. "If you won't trust her because she's orc," I said, voice steady, "then trust her because she once sat by my bed for an entire night when the same fever nearly took me last winter. She mixed the medicine, stayed until morning, and never asked for payment. That boy will die waiting for your fear to pass." Mara said nothing. She simply worked, grinding, measuring, boiling, with the calm precision I had watched 100 times. By dawn, the child's fever broke. The mother returned the next day carrying a small honey cake, eyes downcast but grateful. She pressed it into Mara's hands. Mara's fingers trembled as she accepted it. She was not used to being seen as someone who saved lives instead of someone who might take them. After that, a few voices in town grew quieter. Not everyone changed their minds, but the cruelest whispers lost some of their strength. People still stared, but fewer crossed the street to avoid us. That night, we sat on the porch again, the honey cake between us untouched. The lanterns cast long shadows across the wooden planks. I turned to her and spoke the words I had been carrying since the moment she first confessed. "I don't want to go slow anymore just because we're afraid," I said. "I love you, Mara. Not out of guilt. Not because you're convenient or familiar. I love you because when I thought I was looking for someone else, the person I needed was already right here, leaving herbs at my door, sharing supper, sitting in silence that never felt empty. I was just too blind to see it." Tears slipped down her green cheeks, but she was smiling. She leaned her head against my shoulder, and for the first time, there was no careful distance between us, just the steady warmth of two people who had finally named what had been growing between them for 2 long years. The porch creaked softly under our weight. The town might still talk tomorrow, but tonight the only voices that mattered were the ones we had finally let ourselves hear. The next morning I put on the white shirt again. It had become more than just fabric now. It was a promise I had finally kept. I met Mara at the well as usual, but this time I didn't let go of her hand when we walked toward the market square. She glanced at me once, surprised, then laced her fingers more firmly with mine. A simple copper hairpin I had given her the night before caught the sunlight in her dark hair. People stared. Some whispered behind their baskets of turnips and loaves of bread. Others simply watched in silence. We kept walking anyway. Our days changed in the smallest, sweetest ways. Mara still spent her mornings at the apothecary learning new remedies and her afternoons gathering herbs along the forest edge. I still repaired broken lanterns and stubborn locks for the townsfolk, but now there were new threads woven into the routine. Every morning she left a warm cup of herbal tea on the bench outside my workshop, the steam carrying the faint scent of apples and mint. In return, I fixed the wobbly shelf in her study that had been bothering her for months. She scolded me gently when I forgot to eat lunch, and I began memorizing the names of the plants she used most often so I could help her sort them in the evenings. We no longer sat in careful silence on the porch. We talked about her dreams of opening a small clinic one day, about my quiet wish to build something lasting with my hands. Every touch, every shared glance felt intentional now. Our first real date wasn't in any tavern or under lantern light in the square. We packed a simple basket, fresh bread, a wedge of sharp cheese, dried apples, and a flask of hot tea, and walked up the gentle hill behind the town where the wildflowers still bloomed late into autumn. The grass was soft beneath us as we sat looking out over Harrowmere. The roofs of the town looked small and peaceful from up here. Mara leaned against my shoulder and asked quietly, "Does it feel strange to you? Going from neighbors to this?" I smiled and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "It feels strange in the best way possible. like I spent 2 years looking out the wrong window and finally turned around to see what was always right beside me. She laughed softly, the sound warm against my chest, and for the first time I realized how much I had missed hearing that laugh, directed only at me. A full year passed in that gentle rhythm. I spent my spare hours quietly expanding my little wooden house, adding a second room and reinforcing the walls so it could comfortably hold 2 lives instead of 1. I left Mara's original house untouched and turned it into a small treatment room for her patients. One quiet autumn evening, exactly 1 year after the night she had first said she loved me, I put on the same white shirt I had worn the night everything changed. I walked the few steps to her door and knocked. Mara opened it, saw the shirt, and her golden eyes widened with recognition. A slow smile curved her lips. "You have another date tonight," she teased. "Yes," I answered, my voice steady, "with the rest of my life if you'll have me." I knelt right there on her doorstep, the same place where I had once stood frozen and speechless. From my pocket I took the simple silver ring I had spent months saving for, a band etched with tiny leaves and a single blooming flower, the kind she gathered every spring. "Mara Vere," I said, looking up at her, "I took far too long to realize you loved me. And I took even longer to understand that I loved you too. But from this moment on, I don't want to waste another day not standing beside you as your husband. Will you marry me?" Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she was smiling the brightest smile I had ever seen on her face. "You ridiculous, wonderful man," she whispered. "Of course I will." She pulled me up and kissed me right there under the evening sky, the kind of kiss that felt like coming home after a very long journey. Our wedding was small and simple, held in the open yard between our 2 houses. Elena brought baskets of fresh bread and sweet pastries. The old healer presided over the ceremony with kind, wrinkled hands. Not everyone from town came, but those who did came with genuine warmth. Mara wore a soft green dress embroidered with the healing herbs she loved. I wore the white shirt once more. When she walked toward me across the grass, I knew without any doubt that I had chosen correctly. After the wedding, our joined homes became something more than just a place to live. Patients came for Mara's medicines. Neighbors brought broken tools for me to mend. Children ran freely through the shared yard, laughing between the 2 houses as if the fence had never existed. Some evenings we still sat on the porch exactly as we had in the old days. 1 bowl of soup, 1 book of herbal lore open between us, a half-repaired lantern on the table. The only difference now was that I no longer wondered what this comfortable silence meant. I knew it was home. Sometimes late at night I would look at Mara sleeping beside me and remember the evening I had stood in her doorway holding 3 shirts, asking which one would make me look good for another woman. I had thought my life was about to become complicated that night. Instead, it had finally become clear. The story began with a simple, foolish question: "Do I look okay? I have a date tonight?" And it ended with the answer I had been too blind to see for 2 whole years. The woman I loved had been living right next door all along, waiting for me to finally look at her the way she had always looked at me. I never needed to ask about another shirt again. From that day forward, every single one I wore was chosen for her.